Jamon, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Welcome to Black and Azul. I'm Jamon Moore. With me today, Joel Soria and Alex Morgan. Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing well, thanks, Jamon.
Of course, as always, Jason Scholl is manning the controls. Charles Wollin is on his way back to the area and hopefully will be joining us maybe at the very end of the show, maybe not, but if he can make it, he absolutely will check in. The Quakes drop one today, 4-1 to the Seattle Sounders. We basically, I think, kind of saw what we expected to see, which was a game in which the Quakes weren't really going to go for it, seemed to be more setting themselves up for the playoffs. Maybe that's something we'll get into a bit here with the crew, but also maybe even with Matías Almeyda here in a bit. So 4-1, the Quakes playoff position, 8th seed, nothing changes for the Earthquakes. They had already locked in the 8th seed. They needed to get a win today to have a chance to move ahead of the Colorado Rapids or LAFC. Sporting Kansas City wins. They lock in the 1st seed. That means the Quakes now have a date with Sporting Kansas City. Let's bring in the rest of the crew here. Joel Soria, Alex Morgan. Alex, what did you think of the game today? Was this 3 points that the Quakes really needed to go for, or was it a different kind of game for them?
Yeah, thanks, Jamon. I mean, this was not a match in which the Quakes needed a result. They had secured a postseason berth on Wednesday night with a 3-1 victory over LAFC. So in that sense, I'm hesitant to overanalyze this performance. But to me, it is still a little concerning that the Quakes allowed 4 goals for the first time since September. Although they played really well in the first half, I think that second half was probably the worst stretch of soccer for Florian Jungwirth and Osvaldo Alanis since September, I think. So while I'm not exactly panic-stricken, I'm also not really reassured or emboldened by that game the same way that I was after Wednesday night's victory. I think a couple guys had opportunities to step up tonight, like Cade Cowell and Luis Felipe, but they didn't really do that. On the other hand, I think Marcos Lopez had a really strong game with that gorgeous free kick goal and a clearance off the line. So I'm really ambivalent about this one, I guess, a little disappointed.
Yeah, Joel Soria, your thoughts tonight. Matías Almeyda making some substitutions, really kind of going young and with mostly players who haven't seen much of the pitch this season with that substitution, and the Quakes give up 2 more goals after that.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Look, second-rate lineup, second-rate result. I think that this performance in general wasn't, I'm sure, what Matías and co were looking for. That said, as we know, the team has already qualified for playoffs, and the mindset has to be exactly that next match against Sporting Kansas City and not this 4-1 loss. I did mention that the floodgates could have opened. They did open. The team didn't fall back. As we know, they are going to keep pushing forward, pedal to the metal, full throttle football from Almeyda, which can have some repercussions mentally. And that's really what I want to ask Matías heading into this press conference is what's the mentality that the team is going to, cultivate moving forward into, a very decisive match against Kansas City.
And Alex, the Quakes didn't have Jackson Newell due to a suspension from 2 yellows in the last game and being sent off. They also didn't have Andy Rios, who was serving a suspension for yellow card accumulation. And maybe not a surprise to us, it seemed to be maybe a surprise to other people. Carlos Fierro, we saw leave the field kind of limping over on the sideline during the last game when he was subbed off. And he came into the game as questionable, and he wasn't even in the 20 tonight. So do we have any sense as to Carlos Fierro? Is there how serious is it his injury at this point, or do you think he's being rested for the playoffs?
The fact that he wasn't in the roster, the 18 at all, was a little concerning to me. I'd like to get an update about his condition from Matías Almeyda because I think the Quakes missed him tonight. The Quakes missed him. They missed Andy Rios, and they missed Jackson Ewell a lot. They didn't create that many chances going forward. I was pretty disappointed in Cade Cowell's performance. I think he was kind of a non-factor. He has so much energy and enthusiasm, all of that in abundance, but he just doesn't have the composure in the final third yet, or the technique. And I think his movement was also a little too linear for that center forward role. I think at this stage he can contribute as a substitute, but he's just not starting caliber yet. And I think the same goes for Luis Felipe, who filled Jackson Ewell's role. I continue to be incredibly frustrated with his performances. He had like a sort of a weird flailing clearance in the first half that almost turned into an own goal. And then in the second half, I think he was largely at fault for Seattle's second goal. He got turned by Roldan and didn't recover fast enough to block Rui Diaz's shot. All of which just goes to show the Quakes don't have a really deep roster. They can't afford to lose guys like Jackson Ewell and Andy Rios and Carlos Fierro, especially now that they're heading into the playoffs where every game is do or die.
And Joel, we saw an absolutely gorgeous free kick goal from Marcos Lopez. I think this show is out in front talking about the improvements that Marcos Lopez has been making very quickly after MLS is back. When we got to finally see him again after he was out the first part of the season with an injury, has there been a bigger bright spot this season? And what did you think of Marcos Lopez's performance tonight?
I don't think so, Jamon. I've mentioned it a couple of times now. Aside from Cade Cowell, I think we can all agree that Marcos Lopez has been the biggest bright spot of 2020 as it relates to the Quakes. I think that he had a quite a stupendous performance tonight. Aside from that unfortunate sequence that he was involved in towards the latter stages of the game, where he was involved in a so-called own goal. It looked like Rui Diaz might have gone toe to that, but anyways, Lopez and Alanis as well as Marcinkowski were involved in that sequence there that resulted as a goal for the Sounders. But all in all, I think that Lopez is starting to gain composure, is starting to really evolve as a player and mature. Most importantly, I think he's always had the maturity off the field. He's a really well-spoken, respectful, young 20-year-old. And on the field, he's starting to show that. I think that, he's taking a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. He's responding. And he's also stepping up in major occasions, which you can't ask for more for a player who came to the United States for his very first time just less than 2 years ago at the age of 19. Has no family, no supporting cast aside from the Quakes organization here in San Jose, and has been able to work his way up, and is now projecting to be one of Gareca's principal fullbacks for the Peruvian national team. That if we follow South American international soccer, if you follow CONMEBOL, then that Peru is definitely a team that can generate a lot of good results out there.
Absolutely, Joel. I think that at this point right now, the way I see it, Marcos Lopez is the most promising player in the San Jose Earthquake squad. At 20 years old, already having international experience with Peru, I think he's probably got the highest ceiling of any player in this team right now, and is one of the most well-positioned to possibly make the jump to Europe at some point in the next couple of years. We haven't really talked about that with him yet, but I think if he keeps playing this way, that is a possibility for him in the next couple of years. And something that we've also seen in this most recent stretch of games, is that he has an eye for goal too. He scored 2 goals for the Quakes now in the last month and a half, and they've both been stunners. I mean, he had that sweet left-footed volley right into the top corner against the Galaxy back in October. And then this goal from the free kick was just an audacious, remarkable strike. I think he's just had a phenomenal season this year. And I think we're probably going to talk about this once the season finishes, but for me, it's neck and neck between him and JT Marcinkowski for the best young player in this team this year.
Yeah, Jesse Fiorinelli was talking about how Marcos Lopez impressed a lot of scouts and such during the international break in between the 2019 season and the start of the 2020 season. And he saw a lot of upside. I think we were all waiting to see some more consistency out of him. And certainly his performances, I think, have really given Nick Lima the opportunity to be able to go back to the right back position where he's at strongest. So now that you've got, Lopez as a strong every game option at left back, it gives also Nick Lima the opportunity to go back to being a strong right back. And now your outside back positions coming into next season actually look in pretty good shape overall. Maybe could be a little bit deeper, but at this point, that's an area of strength for them. Little guy coming in here. Let me pitch it back over to you, Joel. How do we look at this Sporting Kansas City matchup now as we're waiting for the press conferences to start and to get a chance to talk to Matías Almeyda? It looks like Tommy Thompson as well tonight. Joel, talk to us a little bit about Sporting Kansas City. We haven't seen them yet this season. Is that a good thing for the Quakes, or would they have been better served playing a team that they knew well, like Portland or Seattle? What do you think?
I think, I mean, that's a very, very, I think there's, my answer is definitely going to be subjective, and there's multiple ways of looking at it. Sorry. It might be a blessing in disguise that the Quakes haven't played them since midsummer of 2019. It might be an advantage to Sporting Kansas City, who has always been a formidable team in this league, as we know, and has always done pretty well under Peter Vermees. It looks like we have Matías Almeyda joining us here.
Yep.
Hey everyone, thanks for being with us this evening. We are now joined by head coach Matías Almeyda. We'll start by taking a few questions in English and then a couple in Spanish. So let's get started with Jamon Moore.
Good evening, Matías. Bless you for the sneeze there. So for tonight, was this game really about going for 3 points or not having players like Jackson Ewell and Andy Rios available and putting on young players in the second half when you were down a goal? Was this more about positioning your team to be ready for the playoffs? What was your goal for tonight, and did you achieve that in a 4-1 loss?
Este partido se trataba más de conseguir los 3 puntos o con la falta de Andy Ríos y Jackson, y después en el segundo tiempo pusiste varios jóvenes. Este partido se trataba de ganar los 3 puntos o solamente para que tu equipo se prepare para playoff. ¿Cuál era tu objetivo para este partido? Y si sentís que lograste ese objetivo del partido.
Creo que siempre nos preparamos para tratar de competir y ganar.
We always try to prepare ourselves to compete and win.
El partido sacando los goles creo que fue bueno.
I think discounting the goals, the game was good.
Si concretamos los goles, las posibilidades de gol que tuvimos, sobre todo el primer tiempo,
If we took advantage of the chances we had today, especially in the first half,
marcó la diferencia que ellos concretaron y nosotros no.
the difference was that they made their chances and we did not.
Pero en líneas generales creo que el partido fue bueno, más allá de que lo hayamos perdido. Me gustó el funcionamiento de poder ver a un Kate los 90 minutos, los cambios de los jóvenes que ingresaron. Creo que vinimos a buscar un resultado positivo, pero sabíamos y sabemos de la calidad del rival.
But generally, I think the game was good. It makes me happy to see Kate Cowell be able to play 90 minutes, and when the other youngsters who came on, we came here to compete, but we also know the reality that we have today.
Thank you, Matías. We'll go to Alicia Rodriguez.
Thank you. Matías, wanted to ask, you guys get a little bit of a break now. You said all season that you prefer to have time to work with the players between games. Is there anything in particular that you want to focus on heading into the playoff game? Thank you.
Ahora toca un poco de descanso. Este año ya venís diciendo que hace falta tener tiempo para trabajar una semana entera con el equipo. Si hay algo que tenés pensado, enfocarte sobre todo esta semana más que otras cosas.
Sí, primero y principal, vamos a dar 2 días de descanso.
First and foremost, we're going to give 2 days to rest.
Desde que inició el torneo, prácticamente los jugadores no han descansado.
Since the season has started, the players pretty much have not rested.
Es disfrutar hasta el miércoles lo que logramos de entrar a playoff,
It's about enjoying up until Wednesday what we achieved, which was making it to playoffs,
recuperar jugadores
recover players,
y después enfocarnos bien en el partido, en los 90 minutos de una final que viene.
and then focus on the upcoming game, 90 minutes, which is a final.
Thank you, Matías. Alex Morgan.
Hi, Matías. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us tonight. This was the first time that you guys allowed 4 goals in a while, in like almost 2 months, I think. What went wrong in defense, and how much does it concern you that at this juncture in the season, you've allowed 4 goals in a game?
Hace casi 2 meses que el equipo recibe 4 goles. Para vos, ¿qué falló hoy con la defensa que hizo que el equipo reciba 4 goles? Y si te preocupa que la defensa recibió 4 goles en este punto del torneo.
Creo que en los goles hay errores nuestros y virtud del rival.
I think in the goals there's mistakes from us and also virtues from the opponent.
Es un rival que viene jugando con un mismo sistema hace 3, 4 años.
They're a team that's been playing with the same system for 3 or 4 years.
Eso realmente es difícil de lograr.
That's really difficult to achieve.
Este rival ha ido creciendo año tras año a medida de sus refuerzos, sus jugadores importantes que tiene.
This team has been growing year after year with reinforcements and the players that they've already had.
Sumado a un gran gusto futbolístico que tiene su entrenador, que lo felicito.
Adding on to a great football taste that their coach has.
Se lo dije a él también.
I congratulate him, and I also told him personally.
Y el fútbol, cuando tenés posibilidad de hacer gol, hay que hacerlos.
And in football, when you have a chance to score, you have to take advantage.
Porque tuvimos posibilidades más claras que ellos de hacer gol.
Because we had clear goal-scoring chances in them.
Pero seguramente el día que Kay, por ejemplo, tenga 70 partidos jugando en la primera,
But for example, the day that Kate has 70 games with the first team,
y tenga la posibilidad que tuvo hoy, seguramente no perdone.
and he has the chances that he had today, surely he will not forgive the opposition.
Pero bueno, también es una realidad que somos un equipo con muchos jóvenes
But there's a reality also that we're a team with many youngsters,
y que era mejor equivocarse este partido
and it was better to make mistakes this game
para poder ver la realidad y llegar a esta final que vamos a tener de playoff.
to be able to see the reality and then prepare for this final that we're going to play in this following game for the playoffs.
Rui Díaz, Lodeiro, Morris, y te puedo seguir nombrando jugadores de Seattle, se equivocan una vez.
These players, and I can keep naming players from Seattle, they'll make a mistake once,
2 veces no se equivocan.
they don't make the same mistake twice.
Bueno, somos conscientes de eso. Ahora nosotros tenemos que profundizar en nuestro trabajo
We're aware of that. Now we have to strengthen with our work
y terminar estos playoffs de la mejor manera.
and finish the playoffs in the best way we can.
Thank you, Matías. We'll take one last question in English from Alicia Rodriguez.
Matías, I wanted to ask about Marcos Lopez. He had some ups and downs in the game, but his goal was absolutely fantastic. Is that something he's been working on, or is that something that you knew coming in? He was able to score nifty free kicks like that.
Pregunta sobre Marcos, que tuvo momentos altos y bajos en el partido, pero metió un muy lindo gol. Si ese gol es algo entrenado, si vos ya sabías que podía meter el tiro libre de ese nivel.
Sí, creo que hay virtud de parte de Marcos.
I think there's a virtue from Marcos' part.
Fui jugador de fútbol,
I was a football player.
fui jugador de selección,
I was a national team player.
y cuando te citan a una selección para una eliminatoria, es normal que a los 20, 22 años tu cabeza esté un poco acá y un poco en tu país.
And when you get called up to the national team for World Cup qualifiers at such a young age, it's hard for your head to be in and out because you're focused on your country.
Marcos también estuvo por momentos jugando bien y por momentos como el equipo cometiendo algún tipo de error, pero en líneas generales creo que todo el equipo hizo un buen partido más allá de los errores.
For certain moments, Marcos played well, and then, like everybody else, has made some mistakes. But generally, I think the whole team played well beyond some mistakes that they've made.
Pero no es fácil jugar un partido sabiendo que tenés que ir a representar a tu país.
But it's not easy playing a game knowing that you're going to have to go and represent your country.
Inconscientemente pensás en no lesionarte, pensás en muchas cosas.
Subconsciously, you're thinking about not getting injured. You're thinking about many things.
Pero bueno, esto lo podemos explicar a aquellos que pasamos por estos caminos.
But those of us who have lived this path can explain it.
Y lo entendemos también.
And we also understand it.
Thank you, Matías. We'll take 2 questions in Spanish, starting with Joel Soria.
Buenas noches, Matías. Le mando un abrazo. Le tengo dos preguntas hoy, muy simples, yo creo. La primera sería, ¿qué tan seria es la lesión del Güero? Y la segunda, ¿cuál va a ser el mensaje que le va a dar al grupo antes de ese partido vital contra Sporting? Gracias.
La lesión de Güero, esperemos recuperarlo esta semana. No es muy grave, confiamos mucho en nuestros kinesiólogos, en la rehabilitación. Ya se está trabajando en función de que él pueda llegar al partido de la mejor manera. Y con respecto al mensaje, yo vivo dando mensajes. No voy a esperar previo a un partido para darle un mensaje. Ellos saben del diálogo, de lo que pienso del fútbol, de la vida, de cómo entrenar, cómo salir a una cancha, más allá que me pueda equivocar o no, pero el mensaje de un entrenador no debe ser solamente previo a un partido. Es un camino. Y nosotros estamos transitando este camino.
Thank you, Matías. One last question from Carlos Eustace.
Matías, buenas noches. Carlos Eustace, Telemundo 48. Primero, el resultado es engañoso por el trámite del partido, pero ¿qué ventaja tiene que estos errores sucedan ahora, antes de un parón de selecciones y antes de que vengan los playoffs? ¿Cuál es la ventaja de poder corregir con ese tiempo?
Creo que, bueno, la ventaja de hoy fue que realmente nosotros estábamos en playoff y perdiendo el partido, sí, estábamos dentro de los playoffs. El tema de todo esto es que si nos teníamos que venir a jugar los playoffs, hoy estábamos hablando de otra cosa, porque hoy ya dejábamos de trabajar con este resultado. Y como todo en la vida, deja enseñanza. Saber que si hiciste 45 minutos con una concentración buena, con un sistema de juego bueno, no podés dormir con los equipos peligrosos, que son los candidatos a ganar el título, porque no bastan 5 minutos para que se termine el partido. En 1 minuto y medio te liquidan el partido como fue hoy. Nosotros después del 2-0 nos pusimos 2-1, se abrió otra vez el partido, y volvimos a cometer errores y sacamos del medio. Bueno, ya nos pasó esto hace 1 mes y medio atrás, lo aprendimos, y era normal que el partido de hoy todo el mundo estuviese un poco relajado, ¿no? Entre comillas, porque el objetivo que parecía imposible lo habíamos logrado, pero también era una realidad en Seattle y San José. Entonces nosotros vamos de a poco construyendo nuestro futuro y jugamos a un equipo que tiene un presente totalmente diferente en muchos aspectos.
All right. Thank you very much, Matías and Augustine, and hope you have a safe flight home.
Thank you.
Okay, so Matías Almeyda tonight, we talked a little bit about how the Quakes had chances, didn't capitalize on their chances. Looking at the shots on goal, they only had 3 shots on goal tonight, but one of those was Cade Cowell, and he specifically did call out Cade's finishing in this game. Alex Morgan, let me toss it to you. Is there some concern at this point that Cade Cowell does seem to be getting some clear chances almost every single time he steps on the pitch, but more recently, since his goal against LA Galaxy, particularly in these breakaway situations, we really haven't seen him be able to finish that off? Should we be concerned at all about that coming into next season?
Absolutely, Jamon. I'm definitely concerned about that. It sounds like Matías Almeyda kind of called him out for it. He said the Quakes had a couple clear chances tonight, but they didn't take them. As I said earlier in the show, Cade Cowell has the power, he has the pace, and he has the energy, but he hasn't shown the composure in the final third. You look at Jordan Morris is a great example of a player who is more of the full package in that he has the energy, has the power, has the pace, but he also has that finishing. That little dink he had over JT Marcinkowski to put away one of Seattle's, I think, third or fourth goals was just gorgeous. But in these one-on-one situations, Cade Cowell hasn't been able to finish his chances. He had a sort of a wild shot on the break in the second half tonight, or late in the first half, I think. Against LAFC on Wednesday, he had a really gorgeous one-on-one opportunity. He earned it by getting in behind, using his pace, but then he completely fluffed the finish. So I think that's definitely a concern. And look, he's still only 17. He has a lot of time to improve his technique, to improve his finishing, and to improve all these different aspects of the game. I mean, you look at a guy like Marcos Lopez, who just, a year and a half ago was still looking really shaky at the back. But if you look at how far he has come this season, if Cade Cowell has that same trajectory, I think he's easily on the right track, but it's just not there yet.
We do know in the academy he was finishing almost on a goal per game pace. So he does have finishing ability in him. Perhaps it's just getting some confidence. Joel, I want to toss it to you to give us a sense for the Spanish part of the press conference, the conversation that you were having. And I believe you were going to also try to get an update on Carlos Fierro. Were you able to get an update on his situation as well as part of your conversation with Matías Almeyda?
Yeah, I was. I asked Matías what the status was regarding Carlos Fierro. He said that it isn't a serious injury and that they should be regaining him back in about a week or so. And now let's remember, obviously the Quakes will have a wide gap between this game and the one against Sporting Kansas City in Kansas City in that do or die playoff match. There's an international break. You're going to have players going to their respective national teams, just like Garam, just like Vaco did in a couple of days ago. I also asked them what the overall message would be heading into that pivotal game against Kansas City. And he said that he's not the type of coach to give a message prior to a game. He says that he lives and breathes the message. He walks and lives that message day in and day out, and that the players and the team should already know what the message is, which was a little surprising to me. I honestly wanted to get a sense of whether or not the team felt like they were putting any pressure on themselves to actually win this time around in MLS Cup playoffs. You can't really gauge a sense of where that pressure lies at the moment. Don't know if they're going to go in there laissez-faire or they're going to go in there, putting their feet up against the fire. It's tough to say. I wish I would have gotten more clarity, but that's how Matías operates at times.
I mean, Joel, I think there's only one way that Matías is ever approaching a playoff game, and that's gung-ho, all out. That's his style. We saw that at MLS is back. He's a coach that does well in the playoffs, in the postseason, in tournaments. And I'm optimistic that we'll be able to see that from the Quakes. Obviously, it's a tricky situation. They're going to have players going on international break. Vaco and Guram Kashia are already with the Georgian national team. Marcos Lopez is probably, I think, going to be joining the Peruvian national team, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't confirmed that, though, but that's what I would suspect, given he's been called up. He was called up in October earlier as well. And the way that Matías Almeyda has treated international absences in the past is that he slowly integrates players back into the squad, but he's going to want all of those guys for the playoff matches. He doesn't have time to rest them and bring them back slowly. So that's a concern of mine. Sporting Kansas City are obviously a really tough matchup as well. San Jose did beat them 4-1 last season, but then they lost to them 2-1, and they haven't played them yet this year. So it's going to be a little bit of a wild card, I think.
Just to go back to that point, though, regarding the message and the way that the message was delivered tonight, I get it. I understand. I know Matías's way of operating in this space. I know what he's about on and off the field. But I don't think it hurts to double down on messaging and make it public, not only to us, but also to the players who might watch and consume this material or other soccer material on Twitter or in various spaces. Why? Because if the players, obviously, I've heard Matías time and time again, they're with him 5, 6, 7 days a week. But there have been times this season where the players haven't gotten the message. There have been times last year when the players haven't gotten the message. So I don't think that you can overdo the relaying of messaging here. And that's really that's the case that I'm trying to make, Alex. In order for it to stick, and it needs to be out there as much as possible. Why? Because this group of players has proven in the past that they struggle comprehending or internalizing some of the messaging that has been blasted out time and time again by Matías.
Well, and I agree, and I think that in some respects, the Quakes need to be more ambitious. This is Matías Almeyda's second season in charge of this team, and while it's sort of surprising, it feels like a surprise. It feels like a huge success just to have made the playoffs, given the way that this season's going, given the fact that they were bottom of the table in late September. This is Matías Almeyda's second season in charge of this team, so there really shouldn't be any excuses. This team should be pushing to do well in the playoffs at this point, and they should be setting high expectations for themselves. So I think you're absolutely right in that regard, Joel.
Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about look ahead to Sporting Kansas City and the break, because we do have kind of a bit of a break here because of the international games. And MLS, when they had laid out this schedule for this part of the season, when they had laid out this kind of second part after MLS is back, had decided that they wanted to fit in an international break here and then begin the playoffs after. Remember back in 2017, the Quakes won their decision day game against Minnesota United and immediately turned around and played, I think it was 2 days, maybe 3 days later, against Vancouver Whitecaps and lost 5-0. Now they're going to get a chance to basically sit for 2 weeks, except for the players on international duty. And Matías Almeyda did mention that Marcos Lopez may have his head in his international duties, so I think we'll expect that he will be also taking part in that. So given this kind of break at this point, this 2-week break until the next set of games, Joel, let me toss it to you. Does this favor the Quakes in the way that at MLS is back, where they had 2 weeks really to focus in on a restart of something, and they were really fit and ready to go, although the first game was a bit sloppy? Does this favor them, or do you think it favors a team like Sporting Kansas City, a #1 seed, where they can effectively get ready for a team like the Quakes and get a lot of tape about what the Quakes have been doing in this second part of the season? Where do you see it?
I think that it's a level playing field for both teams, honestly. I think that no one really has the edge outside of whoever probably has less players reporting for national team duty. Now, we know that thanks to history, that Matías does really well in these quote-unquote tournament situations, right? He's done it with Chivas, primarily with Chivas. He did it time and time again. Regarding the CONCACAF Champions League, he really had time to put together this tournament-like environment with his team, was able to prep, had the time to travel, had the time to practice, and they did well. They hoisted the cup when all was said and done, And he's done that in Liguilla, which is the playoff equivalent for the Mexican league. So I think that I think that no particular team has an advantage here, but it would be a crime to not admit that Matías has an advantage when it comes to succeeding in tournament-like atmospheres. Peter Ramiz is obviously a well-experienced coach, one of the longest-serving coaches in MLS history. He has a system. He knows what he plays for. He knows how he likes to play. Obviously, the ownership group in Kansas City holds the team to high standards. The players have really acclimated well. A new batch of players, a lot of youngsters for Sporting Kansas City, a lot of homegrowns, and then also stars like Alan Pulido, who we have to mention that he's going to be an X factor for Sporting. So I think that it's not really going to benefit a team more than the other. But the Quakes do have a slight advantage to the Quakes teams that came prior to them, given that they have Matías and his resume.
And we are waiting for Tommy Thompson. I was just going to mention, we are waiting for Tommy Thompson to join the press conference. So Alex, go ahead and jump in here.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if I agree with that analysis, Joel, in that I think tactically Sporting Kansas City might have the edge. I think the Quakes would have benefited from being able to bring a surprise on Sporting Kansas City. I think they would have been more well placed to play Sporting Kansas City in October, for instance, when the games were coming thick and fast, when each team was playing 2-3 games a week, because in that scenario, Sporting Kansas City wouldn't really have time to prepare, to watch a lot of game film and to prepare for San Jose's, pretty unique defensive man marking system. But now they have 2 weeks to sort of make a game plan and strategize for that. So I think that gives Sporting Kansas City a slight tactical advantage. The fact that the Quakes have such a unique style of play, I think usually allows them to surprise teams more and gives them sort of a tactical upper hand, but that might be negated by this 2-week break.
I don't buy it. I respectfully don't agree, Alex. I think that, yes, you mentioned that the Quakes do have a unique playing style, and that unique playing style heavily relies on fitness. The Quakes are going to have roughly 2 weeks to get in prime shape if they weren't already in it. You can't tell me that doesn't benefit them. That definitely does. Not only that, but the ethos that the team's going to need to in order to make a deep run in a tournament-like scenario. I think that if the more that I analyze, the more that I realize that everything's kind of falling into place for the Quakes. The one concern, obviously, is whether or not they're going to have all their ducks in a row. And what I mean by that is, are the players coming back from national team play? Are they going to be in prime shape, right? Are they going to be able to hit the ground running the same as Wando, or the same as Jackson Ewell, the same as Lima? And I'm mostly referring to, obviously, Marcos Lopez, right? Who we know is most likely going to be joining the Peruvian national team. Now that we can put that much more pressure on Lopez, because he has proven to be one of the Quakes' most reliable players. Then and I would say also in a playoff scenario, you need to rely on your second DP. You have to. I mean, we haven't seen much of Vaco at all the second half of the season, but you can't make a deep run for the MLS Cup if you're only limiting yourself to one DP. You have to find a way to sprinkle in that second DP, and you have to cross your fingers and hope that a player like Vaco steps up, whether he's playing 50 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. you have to hope that he's going to pull through for you.
And fans, jump in here with some of your comments about how you think the Quakes will fare against Sporting Kansas City, and if time permits, we will share a few of those with everyone here on the show. Brian Aboyag says, sorry if I didn't get that last name correct, Brian, that can confirm Lopez has been called up for national team duty. Our fans saving us as always, because I'm not very good with Spanish on the Twitter. And so if they've announced that, kudos obviously to Marcos Lopez. We didn't get an announcement yet from the Quakes on that. So at this point, obviously, there is going to be this time of kind of waiting and seeing how this team is going to be able to come out, whether after a 2-week break they're going to be sharp and they're going to be fit, or whether it's going to be a slog and an ugly game, the same way that we saw them play the Seattle Sounders at MLS's back after another 2-week break. Hopefully, the Quakes learn a bit from that game. Last year, Sporting Kansas City was one of the teams that the Quakes were able to get out of their initial dip at the beginning of the season, where they were struggling a bit. And if everyone will remember, that was one of the games. It was first Portland. I think Sporting Kansas City was either 1 or 2 right after that, where the Quakes came out strong, and which is quite a change from the year before, when Sporting Kansas City came into Avaya Stadium at that time and really kind of had their number. We're still waiting for Tommy Thompson. We're hoping that he's going to be joining us pretty quickly, and we will get going with the player portion of the press conference. It's only going to be Tommy tonight, so we won't keep everyone too much longer beyond that. But these national team duty situations are kind of interesting, and how that's going to affect the team, Joel. Is there a concern because of the necessary for quarantine and such that Marcos Lopez may not be able to play for the Quakes against Sporting Kansas City in the playoff game, and potentially not Vaco either?
Well, I don't think you can rule it out, right? Obviously, we are living in some very unpredictable times, and soccer isn't the exclusion in the equation. There, I think everything's on the table, and hopefully, the situation doesn't go south. Hopefully, nothing gets out of hand. Hopefully, Lopez, like Vaco and like Garam, travel to their respective countries, do their work, come back, follow protocol, which I believe is a 9-day shelter in place, and they get integrated back into the team, and they're ready to take on Sporting Kansas City, and don't mitigate this team in any way, shape, or form. But it would be foolish. It would be foolish to rule out a possibility that involves some sort of negative scenario. It's going to be. I think it's going to be vital, though, for those players to come back in good shape and to come back healthy, because obviously anything can happen with the national teams, and I know that a team like Peru is playing for a whole lot in the CONMEBOL qualifiers, as the Georgians are, trying to reach their way to the Euro 2021. So, you just have to hope that everything just goes well, and the same goes for Sporting Kansas City, right? Who have a couple of players who represent their national team. Some that I can think of at the top of my head are Russell and Alan Pulido. I might be missing out a few. I apologize for that. But Alan Pulido, probably for sure the biggest case there. They've relied on him so much this season, as they should have. He's come through for the team more often than not. He is their North Star. He is their leading scorer. He is pretty much the heartbeat of that attack. So I think the Mexican national team just arrived in Austria. They're going to be playing against South Korea and Japan. I mean, you obviously don't really know how that's going to end up. Hopefully it's a positive trip for him as well. But yeah, I think, there could be tons of consequences, obviously, on either team if something goes wrong. Let's just hope that doesn't happen, though, obviously.
I agree, Joel. And I'm hearing a comment here in the chat from Diane that says maybe Lopez will turn down his call-up. For the Quakes, that would be the best situation, I think. But at this stage in Marcos Lopez's career, he needs that international experience. And I think, honestly, for all parties, it's good to see Marcos Lopez establish himself with the Peruvian national team. So I think that's a little bit of wishful thinking there. With that said, San Jose's defense is going to need to be in tip-top shape, because Alan Pulido is one of the most prolific goal scorers in Major League Soccer. And I'm a little concerned if Florian Jungwirth and Osvaldo Alanis play the way they did tonight, that they're not going to be able to keep Alan Pulido at bay. Now, we know the Quakes, just to briefly touch on scheduling a little bit more, we don't know exactly when they will play Sporting Kansas City yet, but we do know that it will happen at some point from November 21st through November 24th. That's when all the first round games being played. And I can envision a scenario in which the scheduling of that game could impact the availability of players like Marcos Lopez. So that's one to watch for, keep an eye on.
Okay, looks like we're still waiting for Tommy Thompson. So there's another topic that we wanted to cover tonight, and why don't we just fit it in right here, guys, which is the topic of the closure of Reno 1868 FC. We've talked on this show already about how the relationship between the San Jose Earthquakes and Reno 1868 FC seemed like it was on the rocks. Of course, we've had Coach Ian Russell on the show a couple times. It's unclear whether Ian had any sort of foreknowledge about whether or not this closure was imminent. I know it caught the employees by surprise. I had a chat with the PR guy for Reno, Kevin Bass, and he certainly had just began to hear rumblings the night before that something was up, and then all of a sudden the club closed down. I can tell you just a little bit of what I know about it, which is that it does seem that the employees didn't really know that this was coming, although they got the rumblings maybe quickly the night before. And obviously it puts the Quakes in a position right now without having an affiliate for next season. Now, we know from our conversation with Jeff Reuter last week, Joel Soria, that we can anticipate that the U23 league is coming. And you got Matías Almeyda to talk about how excited that would make him and how much it would help MLS if the U23 team came. But I'm not hearing that Ian Russell is in a position to step into the U23s. There's another name being named so far, at least for that, if it becomes a reality, which maybe we'll get to at a later time. Ian Russell's contract is with the Earthquakes, not with Reno. Where do you see kind of, all this going in terms of, affiliate relationships? Are the Roots an option? The U23s, is this a big deal? What do the Quakes do about the Ian Russell situation? Should they be afraid of letting him go at this point? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a shame that lower division soccer in America is constantly living through this type of scenario, right? Where teams are folding left and right. There's no financial stability. There's no future. There's no pathway to bigger and better things. Let's just put it that way. What's happening in Reno doesn't surprise me at all. As the great Jeff Reuter reported just a couple of months ago, MLS is looking, or not really looking, they're planning to execute a plan that will reintroduce a reserves league under the MLS umbrella, more known as the U23 league. This is a type of structure that is obviously very common in a lot of other soccer pyramids around the world. One that definitely fosters an academy to a pro pipeline, puts things in order a lot. I would say that much more than the type of affiliation that the Quakes and other teams had with USL Championship teams. That's not a knock. That's just a reality, in my opinion. Regarding Ian Russell, who was co-named as the USL Championship Coach of the Year, look, I don't know what the situation is, to be honest. I suspect that the Quakes are going to take this U23 team very seriously, considering what we heard from Almeyda a couple of weeks ago. It sounds like he was very bullish about it. He's certainly very animated about the topic. He's used to that type of structure. He's a longtime player, as we know, longtime coach. He wants to have his base within reach. A U23 team under the San Jose Earthquakes umbrella would mean that it would probably be stationed in San Jose, perhaps at Earthquake Stadium, which is good. But regarding Ian Russell, just to go back to that, I don't know, Jamon. I think it's really, really hard to say what the future has in store for Ian. I'm sure that whatever it is that's around the corner is going to be fruitful to him and to his coaching staff. He is, in my opinion, one of the better coaches in USL Championship, without a doubt. Not only does he have, the ability to connect with players to another degree, he's also tactically very flexible. And I think that is one thing that can serve him really well wherever he ends up going. I would want to see him in MLS, but I'm not too sure if, there are going to be enough spots open for him to fill. I mean, there are a couple at the moment. You have the case in Los Angeles with Galaxy. Atlanta United is another. DC United. Unfortunately, in my opinion, those teams are a little too big for him. I think that he needs to start off somewhere with where there are less demands in place. As we know, Galaxy is a team that puts a lot of pressures on individuals who work for the team at in high power positions. The same goes for Atlanta United, and the same goes for DC United, who have been under Ben Olsen for as long as I've been alive. So look, I don't know. I think it's really tough to say. I would want him to be a coach in MLS sooner rather than later. Regarding Oakland, I'm not sure if there's going to be a partnership between Oakland and San Jose. I think it's too early to call that. It's all looking very unpredictable at the moment.
And we have a couple things from listeners. I wanted to bring up here is Michael Peachy says, how old is Ian? Would he even want to coach a U23 team, or does he want a shot at a first division team? Crystal clarifies Ian is 45, which I also looked up. Thank you, Crystal, for that. So Alex, at this point, a coach like him, Ian seems to be the guy. He's been in the Quakes organization for a long time. Yeah, he did a small stint at the beginning of his career in the Sounders organization before it was MLS. He also ended his career very quickly at the LA Galaxy. Depending upon Dom Kinnear's situation with the Galaxy, is it even thinkable that he could maybe hold his nose a little bit and go, work for Dom for a year as an assistant and potentially take over the Galaxy in the future? We find ourselves looking across the pitch at Ian Russell in a couple of years as the coach of the LA Galaxy. What do you think, Alex?
I mean, to be watching, Dominic Kinnear and Ian Russell coach the Galaxy would be ridiculous. That would be a little surreal. But I think we're going to be joined by Tommy Thompson right now from the press conference, so we can pick up this conversation afterwards, Jamon. Hi, Tommy. I'm not hearing anything from Jake. Can we just jump in with questions?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Hey, hey, Alex, it's Pedro. Go ahead. It looks like Jake's having a couple of technical difficulties. Go ahead, Alex.
Perfect, thanks. So, Tommy, this was not a match in which you needed a win to make the playoffs, but it's never good to allow 4 goals in a game at this stage in the season. What are your takeaways from tonight's performance?
Yeah, it was a disappointing loss for us. We came here expecting to win, just to keep our momentum going into playoffs. But we have to have a short memory here, forget about this, and focus on the big game against Kansas City here in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Tommy. Sorry about that, guys. I was having some technical difficulties. Let's go over to Alicia Rodriguez.
Thank you. Tommy, I wanted to ask about the preparation for the next game. Most of the time when you go into the playoffs, you've played your opponent at least once, and you guys haven't played Sporting this season. So how do you approach going into the game? Are you going to be doing a lot of video study? Is it going to be more focusing on your game and yourselves? How do you approach that this time?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit strange matching up with a team in the Western Conference playoffs without playing them once all year. But this year has presented all kinds of new obstacles that we've had to learn to overcome. So I'm sure Matías and the rest of the staff are going to do a great job of preparing video on Kansas City, like we always do for every team. And by the time kickoff starts, we're going to know their players. We're going to know exactly what we need to do to get the results. That's what we're going to be focusing on, and we're really looking forward to being back in playoffs.
Thank you, Tommy. Joel Soria.
Hey, Tommy. I imagine that the 2 weeks are going to be crucial for the team to regain fitness. Am I correct? Does the team probably feel a little worn out, and perhaps these 2 weeks are going to be crucial to regenerate those powers that you guys demonstrated in September?
Yeah, it's been a long year. It's been a lot of different obstacles that we've faced, and playing so many games in quick succession is tough on every team in MLS. But right now we have the opportunity to rest up a little bit. But once training starts back up, we're going to be focused and making sure that we're preparing ourselves in the best possible way. So it's a good opportunity to recharge. But as the game day gets closer and closer, I'm sure we're going to be bringing in as much energy as we possibly can.
Thank you. Jamon Moore.
Hey, Tommy, thanks for taking the time. So you guys over the last 2 years, have gone through long stretches of winning streaks and losing streaks. But more recently, we've seen you be able to lose a game and then bounce back. Does this mean that you feel that you guys are getting to the point where the mentality is different and you can absorb a loss and then go straight into the next game and retain the confidence at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this team has shown a lot of character. We've gone through great moments this year. We've gone through extremely difficult moments as well. But there's a belief in this group that whoever's on the field can get the job done. And we're going to learn from our mistakes today. Seattle's a great team, and they made us pay. So we got to make sure that we're going to be as sharp as we can against Kansas City. And this game is a good reminder to make sure that against the top teams in this league, you can't take your foot off the gas pedal for 1 minute. So it's a tough way to end the season, but we've accomplished a lot, and we're definitely gonna have a short memory going into Kansas City. We'll be full of confidence and ready to go in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Tommy. We'll take 2 more questions, starting with Carlos Justiz.
Tommy, Carlos from Telemundo. How are you? Would you say that maybe because you were able to punch your ticket during the week. Today, you felt the team a little more relaxed, and how can you correct that, knowing that you have to play a team you haven't faced, like they said before?
Yeah, it's going to be important for us to make sure that we're focused for all 90 minutes against Kansas City. I mean, Seattle, Kansas, Portland. I mean, they're some of the top teams in the league, so you can't let up. You can't take any plays off, or good teams like that will punish you. And today was a reminder of that. So we're going to focus on getting back to the level of focus that we need and that we've shown we can have against teams like Salt Lake, Vancouver, LAFC. You know, we can do it. We're confident in our ability, and we're going to get the job done in a couple weeks here.
Thank you, Tommy. One last question from Alex Morgan.
Hi, Tommy. You've played in a couple of different positions this season, in the fullback position and in the midfield. Going into the playoffs and beyond, I guess, where do you feel that you can contribute the most for this team? Where do you see your future being positionally?
Over the past 2 years under this management, I played the most as an outside back in this system. With the amount the outside backs attack, I feel like I can really contribute. But in MLS, I've had experience as a forward, center mid, winger, outside back. I mean, you name it. So I'm comfortable all over the field. But I've really enjoyed outside back in this system. That's wherever Matías sees the best fit for me, for whatever game it happens to be, I'll be there and contribute to the team in any way I can.
All right. Thank you very much, Tommy. Hope you have a safe flight home.
All right, thanks.
And thank you all very much for joining us. We will see you in the playoffs.
Okay, and there you have it. Tommy Thompson talking with the media tonight, talking that, yeah, the players are a bit tired. They have been going now several games in this condensed schedule, and a 2-week break is probably going to do them some good. You did see them, I think, tonight looking a bit more tired, waiting to kind of taking this game a little bit less seriously, knowing their playoff spot was secure. And I feel like in the result, that's what we saw tonight. The players, Tommy alluded to it, said that, hey, we were reminded tonight that we can't take a night off. And, kind of indicating that maybe the players to some level did take the night off, knowing that playoff spot was secure, or knowing by scoreboard watching that they wouldn't really be able to move up to another spot, and instead making sure and focusing that the team didn't suffer any new injuries. So at this point, of the season, it's important that the team is able to come back now and be able to get some rest and be able to now focus on supporting Kansas City, who is the best team in the Western Conference. Quite a turnaround from 2019, a team that struggled defensively quite a bit. You can see this season, they've only had 25 goals against. Last season, they had a negative goal differential and were out of the playoffs. This is a team that has always been very dangerous on the attack. The only question really was coming in, how good was going to be the defense? There is some competent, experienced defenders back there, but last season there were struggles. There were some problems, I think, in the middle of the field for the team, which put a lot of pressure on the defense. And even having very good, defenders, sometimes that will happen to good teams. Joel, you got a chance there to talk a bit about kind of the whole topic of was rest needed for this squad? How did you see Tommy's comments tonight?
Well, I think it answers some of our doubts, right? It's pretty apparent that the team was definitely lacking some oxygen tonight. I wasn't sure if perhaps the weather played a factor there. I know that it's pretty chilly up in Seattle at this time of the year. That said, Tommy made a strong case that the team can definitely benefit from some proper rest. They've had, quick turnarounds between games these past few months. To a certain extent, it has kind of played out to their advantage. To another, it hasn't. I think that they can definitely benefit from having 2 days off, like they're going to have Monday and Tuesday off, as Almeyda explained. And then come Wednesday, they're going to pick up training, and they are going to obviously do 5-day training periods with maybe a day or two in between. But it's much different training for 2 weeks at home than it is having to train, 3 days at home and then traveling midweek and coming back and then training again for another 3 days and prepping for a weekend game on a Saturday or Sunday night. So I think that it's definitely going to benefit them. We know that the system is, a guns blazing, attack oriented, pedal to the metal type of style. So, with that in mind, you obviously know that these players aren't, they're not superhumans. They need rest. They need time to, be in their comfort zones and recoup that zen that tends to put them in better positions than not.
And let's talk weather a little bit, Alex, because we've gotten used to seeing Matías Almeyda in the purple sweater, right? And every single game that he's worn the purple sweater, the Quakes have gotten a result. But there's been 3 games where he was not able to wear the purple sweater because of weather, because it was cold, and we even saw some rain in Portland and against Vancouver and against Portland and now against Seattle. We haven't seen the best results. This team's been getting results pretty much every other game except for the games where he had to wear colder clothing. That tells us that this team may struggle in cold. And if you remember a few years back, we saw a MLS Cup final in which we had snow in Kansas City. So it's getting pretty late in the year compared to normal here. We have to expect that it's going to be cold again in Sporting Kansas City. Does this team need to do some special preparation, you think, for inclement weather at this point, Alex?
I think it's possible, Jamon. I mean, it's definitely a possibility that you see, frigid temperatures, if not snow, I think, in Kansas City, in mid to late November. I know that in tonight's game between Real Salt Lake and Kansas City, I think there was snow. They were basically playing in a blizzard. They had to bring out one of those orange balls and sort of mow the snow off the field to make the lines clear and the boundaries clear. And it's going to be difficult for the Quakes. I mean, it's colder here this week in the Bay Area, 55, 60 degrees, but it's going to be a lot colder in Sporting Kansas City, I think. And given how much Almeyda's system demands physically of his players, such a sharp difference in temperatures, in climate, in environment, you have to imagine it has an impact on this team. If it were any other year, I would say they should probably go someplace colder and almost have a little camp, a little training camp. They should go to Sporting Kansas City, travel there a week earlier, train a couple times there, or even go to Seattle, Portland, somewhere colder. But they can't do that this year. And I think that's what they would do any other year. Any other year, they'd travel earlier and they'd have at least a day or two there to prepare. But thus far, I think all of the MLS traveling has been same day. And Kansas City is going to be one of the furthest trips they've had to make. So I think all of those factors could conspire against the Quakes here.
That's not the only factor. Just to quickly add on to that, those are serious factors, and they can definitely influence the outcome of the game. But the other factor that the Quakes haven't really experienced this season is the fact that there's going to be fans at the stadium at Children's Mercy Park rooting for, obviously, Sporting Kansas City if and only if certain Quakes fans are not able to get out there, which is totally justifiable, right? We wouldn't really want to encourage anyone to travel outside of their homes. So I think that can also play a factor without a doubt. I mean, it really just depends how much credit you want to give to the 12th fan, the 12th person. I personally tend to believe that fans and a hostile fan atmosphere, which could be the case in Kansas City more often than not, can definitely influence the game in a way or so. So yeah, just wanted to note that, weather, fans, travel, COVID, all of that is definitely going to have some sort of impact on the game in 2 weeks' time.
Crystal Quadra Cutler mentions here that Colorado may have traveled a day early for their game today because she saw some of the Colorado players posting travel pics on Instagram yesterday. We do know that away media is not allowed to travel. To be honest, we asked because we were hoping we may be able to do a show, particularly if the game was going to be in Portland or Seattle, even if it took driving. But unfortunately, away media is not allowed to travel. Not clear, what the requirements are going to be for fans as well, if that's a concern or not. But probably there's less oversight on something along those lines. Okay, fans, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We're going to do a quick round for final thoughts and close it out tonight. Alex, let's toss it over to you for any final thoughts that you have as we go into this international break and waiting for playoffs to start.
Yeah, Jamon, I think this was a disappointing loss for the Quakes. Allowing 4 goals in the second half is never good, especially at this point in the season. But given the circumstances, I guess I'm not unduly concerned. I think guys like Marcos Lopez had a strong performance, but guys like Luis Felipe, Cade Cowell, I think Florian Youngworth, Oswaldo Alanis less so. So it sort of all cancels out for me. I think in the end, this one's a bit of a wash, and now all of our focus has to turn to San Jose's playoff match against Sporting Kansas City, their first playoff game since 2017. I think we're going to do our best to provide comprehensive coverage of that game for you guys, for the fans, and we're super excited about that.
Yeah, Joel, first time playoff since 2017. Final thoughts from you tonight.
Yeah, what an achievement. Obviously, can't overstate the fact that this is definitely a positive for the Quakes, clinching playoffs. I would say that in a much more normal situation, I would be very worried that the Quakes lost 4-1 the game before MLS Cup playoffs began. But this time around, and specifically with the national team duties coming up and taking a span of 2 weeks, I think the Quakes should feel pretty confident and comfortable about where they stand and also feel the same way about their possibilities heading into that match against Sporting Kansas City. Obviously, 2 teams that have a history, not this year, which is definitely a bit peculiar considering that Sporting Kansas City is obviously in the same conference as the Quakes. 2 coaches that somewhat know each other, that definitely respect each other a whole lot. Matías has spoken wonders of Peter Vermes in the past, vice versa. They know each other. They know their styles. Sporting Kansas City has been on a really, really good run since early October, winning 6, I believe, out of 8 games, only losing once, and I think accumulating a draw in there as well. So they're in really, obviously, top shape. A team that hasn't really been spoken about a whole lot, considering that, the Timbers and the Sounders and the LAFCs of the world, and even a struggling Galaxy takes more of the limelight in the national sphere. So, look, I think that obviously tonight could have been much better scoreboard-wise for the Quakes, but they're definitely going to benefit from this break just as much as Sporting are. But the Quakes definitely need it. They need that break, and they need to reorganize and galvanize ahead of an MLS Cup playoff match.
A reminder from our fans in the chat that Sporting Kansas City is limiting fans to only 20% of capacity right now. Probably that 20% is going in a raffle, I would imagine, to season ticket holders at this point. Charles Wollin is traveling tonight and was unable to join us, but our best to him for finishing safe travel. For Joel Soria, for Alex Morgan, for our executive producer, Jason Scholl, and our associate producer, Aaron Scholl, I'm Jamon Moore, also for Charles Wollin. Good night, everyone. As the Quakes drop tonight 4-1 on decision day, we'll see you for the playoffs.